I'm Zoe Kate, 34 years old, and I never imagined that my mother-in-law Margaret would shatter my daughter Emma's world so completely on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her young life. When Margaret moved into our Denver home 18 months ago, I welcomed her with genuine warmth, despite the subtle barbs that seemed to slip from her tongue like poison. But at Emma's joint 12th birthday celebration with her twin cousins, Margaret revealed her true nature with words so cruel they still echo in my mind. Words that forced me to make the most difficult decision of our family's life. But before I share this painful journey with you, I'd love to know where you're joining me from in the comments below. And if you find yourself drawn to these real family stories about love, loss, and standing up for what's right, please hit that like button and subscribe for daily tales that touch the heart and challenge the soul. My husband Michael and I have shared 14 beautiful years of marriage. We met during graduate school in Chicago, where I was studying art therapy and he was pursuing his master's in education. Michael, now 36, teaches high school history in downtown Denver, staying late most evenings to mentor students who struggle with both academics and life. He possesses this rare combination of gentle strength and unwavering patience that drew me to him all those years ago. Our daughter Emma just turned 12, a spirited girl with wild curly hair and paint-stained fingers who sees magic in everyday moments. She writes poetry that makes my heart ache with its beauty and creates artwork that transforms our refrigerator into a gallery. Emma has always been tender-hearted, feeling everything deeply, but she also carries an inner resilience that reminds me why we were meant to be her parents. Michael grew up as an only child until his mother remarried when he was 14. That union brought his half-brother David into the family picture. Though raised in different homes after their parents' divorce, Michael and David maintained a cordial relationship through the years. David, now married to his college sweetheart Sarah, is the father of 13-year-old twins Olivia and Nathan. The twins attend an exclusive private academy across town and participate in what seems like every available extracurricular activity, judging by Sarah's constant social media updates showcasing their achievements. Margaret became a widow 2 years ago when Michael's stepfather died suddenly from complications following surgery. After selling her suburban home to settle outstanding debts, she claimed financial hardship and asked if she could stay with us temporarily. Michael immediately offered our guest room, and though something in my gut whispered warnings, I agreed. After all, family takes care of family, doesn't it? We transformed our spare room into a comfortable sanctuary, painting the walls a warm sage green, hanging cheerful curtains, and adding a reading chair by the window where morning light streams in. We rearranged our daily routines around Margaret's preferences, adjusted our meal planning to accommodate her dietary restrictions, and modified our weekend activities to include her. Our home is a cozy 3-bedroom ranch with a converted basement that serves as my art therapy practice space. I work part-time, seeing clients 3 days a week, which allows me to be present when Emma returns from school each day. We're not wealthy by any means, but we've created a life filled with love, creativity, and purpose. The first signs of Margaret's favoritism appeared within weeks of her arrival, subtle as shadows but undeniably present. During Sunday family dinners when David brought the twins over, Margaret would mysteriously discover special desserts tucked away for Olivia and Nathan, while somehow forgetting that Emma had mentioned her love for chocolate chip cookies just days before. She memorized every detail of the twins, school schedules, athletic practices, and social events, but would claim confusion when Emma excitedly shared news about her upcoming art exhibition or poetry reading. Emma tried so desperately to connect with her grandmother, bringing her watercolor paintings to show Margaret in hopes of receiving even a glimmer of appreciation. "Look what I painted in art class today, Grandma," she would say, her voice bright with hope as she displayed a landscape that showed remarkable talent for her age. Margaret would barely glance up from her tablet, offering a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before returning to scrolling through photos of the twins' latest accomplishments. But when Nathan scored the winning goal in soccer, Or Olivia received recognition for her violin performance, Margaret's entire demeanor would transform. Her face would light up with genuine pride as she peppered them with questions, hung on their every word, and promised to attend their next event. The contrast was so stark, so painful to witness, that I began documenting these moments in my journal. Not to build a case against Margaret, but to make sense of the growing unease that settled in my chest like a stone. I attempted to address the disparity with Michael on several occasions, choosing quiet moments after Emma had gone to bed. "Have you noticed how differently your mother treats Emma compared to the twins?" I would ask carefully. Michael would run his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was processing something difficult. "Mom's still adjusting to living with us," he would say. "She'll warm up to Emma eventually. You know how she is with change." But as the months passed, I began to realize that this wasn't about adjustment or change. This was about something much deeper, much more troubling. And the birthday party that was supposed to celebrate Emma's special day would finally bring Margaret's true feelings into the harsh light of day. As autumn settled over Denver, the dynamics in our home became increasingly strained. Margaret had been with us for nearly a year, and what I'd initially hoped would be temporary growing pains had solidified into a troubling pattern of behavior that left Emma feeling invisible in her own home. Our financial situation, while stable, had become tighter since Margaret's arrival. Michael's teaching salary and my part-time art therapy practice provided comfortably for our family of 3, but supporting an additional adult, even one who claimed to contribute, had stretched our budget thinner than I was comfortable admitting. Margaret insisted her Social Security barely covered her medications and personal expenses, leaving little for household contributions. We never asked to see her financial statements, taking her word out of respect for her privacy and dignity. Meanwhile, David and Sarah lived in an upscale neighborhood in Cherry Hills Village, both holding executive positions at major corporations. Their lifestyle included European vacations, the latest technology, and designer everything for the twins. I never resented their success. They worked hard for what they had, but Margaret's constant comparisons began to wear on all of us, especially Emma. "Olivia and Nathan are going to that prestigious summer camp in Aspen," Margaret would announce during dinner, her voice carrying an unmistakable note of pride. "Isn't it wonderful that David can provide such enriching experiences for his children?" The implication hung in the air like smoke, that somehow we were failing Emma by not matching these extravagant opportunities. Emma would grow quiet during these conversations, pushing food around her plate while Margaret regaled us with tales of the twins' accomplishments. When Emma mentioned her acceptance into the advanced art program at school, Margaret would offer a perfunctory, "How nice," before immediately pivoting to discuss Nathan's acceptance onto the varsity basketball team, despite being only 13. The subtle favoritism extended beyond words. When the twins visited, Margaret would emerge from her room bearing small gifts, specialty chocolates, new books, trendy accessories she claimed to have picked up during her errands. Emma would watch with poorly concealed longing as her cousins received these tokens of affection while she received nothing but a brief pat on the head. One particularly painful evening in late October, Emma had spent hours working on a charcoal portrait for her grandmother's birthday, a detailed drawing of Margaret's childhood home based on an old photograph she'd found in a family album. The artwork was stunning, showing technical skill far beyond Emma's years and an emotional depth that spoke to her generous heart. "I drew this for you, Grandma," Emma said shyly, presenting the carefully wrapped portrait during our birthday dinner for Margaret. "It's your old house from when Daddy was little." Margaret unwrapped the gift with theatrical care, examined the drawing for a brief moment, then set it aside with a smile that never reached her eyes. "How thoughtful, Emma. I'll have to find a place to put this." That same evening, Olivia called to sing "Happy Birthday" to her grandmother over speakerphone. Margaret's transformation was immediate and dramatic. Her voice became animated, her laughter genuine, her questions endless about Olivia's day. her friends, her upcoming dance recital. The conversation lasted nearly 30 minutes, with Margaret promising to attend Olivia's next performance despite the hour-long drive. Emma's portrait was never displayed anywhere in Margaret's room. I found it weeks later, still in its gift wrap, tucked behind Margaret's dresser. My friend Rachel, a fellow art therapist who'd navigated similar family challenges, became my sounding board during our monthly coffee dates. "You're seeing emotional manipulation," she told me bluntly after I described another incident where Margaret had forgotten to save Emma a piece of her favorite cake while carefully preserving slices for the twins who weren't even visiting that day. "It's textbook favoritism, and it's damaging Emma's sense of self-worth," Rachel continued. "Document these incidents, not to create drama, but so you have concrete examples when you talk to Michael. Sometimes patterns become clear only when we see them laid out chronologically." I began keeping detailed notes in a small journal I hid in my art studio. The entries painted a disturbing picture. October 15th. Margaret spent 45 minutes on phone with twins, discussing their school projects in detail. When Emma tried to share her essay about family traditions, Margaret said she was too tired to focus and went to her room. October 22nd. Margaret attended Nathan's basketball game, 90-minute round trip, but claimed car trouble prevented her from attending Emma's art show, 15 minutes away. November 3rd. Twins received early Christmas gifts from Margaret, expensive art supplies for Olivia, professional basketball shoes for Nathan. When Emma asked about presents, Margaret said, "Christmas is still weeks away, dear." The most troubling entries weren't about gifts or attention, but about the subtle ways Margaret undermined Emma's confidence. Comments about Emma being, quote, too sensitive, suggestions that she should toughen up like her cousins, and backhanded compliments that left Emma questioning her own worth. As Emma's 12th birthday approached in early December, she began expressing excitement about finally becoming a real preteen. She'd been looking forward to this milestone for months, planning how she wanted to redecorate her room and hoping for the camera she'd mentioned wanting for her photography hobby. "Mom, when I turn 12, can we paint my room that deep blue I showed you?" she asked one morning while braiding her hair for school. "And maybe get some string lights to make it feel more grown-up?" I agreed, and we spent evenings browsing online for affordable decorating ideas that would transform her space from little girl to young teenager. She'd also mentioned needing a new phone. Her current one was a basic model with a cracked screen that barely held a charge through the school day. 2 weeks before her birthday, I overheard Margaret on a hushed phone call with David. "Yes, I ordered both of them," she was saying, her voice deliberately low. "Top of the line, just like you suggested. They're going to be absolutely thrilled." When Margaret noticed me in the doorway, she quickly ended the call. "Just coordinating some birthday details with David," she explained with a dismissive wave. That same evening, Emma shared her birthday wish list with us over dinner. "I'd really love that photography workshop we talked about," she said hopefully. "And maybe some professional supplies for my art. Oh, and if it's not too expensive, that camera I've been saving for." She hesitated before adding, "I know money's been tight since Grandma moved in, so even something small would be amazing." Margaret barely acknowledged Emma's words, but when Michael mentioned the twins' upcoming birthday just a few days after Emma's, Margaret perked up immediately. "What are Olivia and Nathan hoping for this year? Are they still into those video games, or have their interests matured?" The enthusiasm in Margaret's voice was unmistakable, and I watched Emma's hopeful expression crumble before she carefully reconstructed her composure. That night, I found her crying quietly in her room, clutching her journal. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Do you think there's something wrong with me, Mom?" she whispered. "Something that makes Grandma not want to love me the way she loves Olivia and Nathan?" My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. This beautiful, talented, sensitive child was questioning her own worthiness because of Margaret's cruel indifference. In that moment, I knew that regardless of Michael's feelings about his mother, something had to change. Emma's emotional well-being was more important than keeping peace in the family. As I held my daughter and whispered reassurances about her value and our love for her, I made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however difficult the conversations ahead might be, I would not allow Margaret to continue poisoning Emma's sense of self. The birthday party was still 2 weeks away, but already I sensed we were heading toward a confrontation that would change our family forever. Little did I know that Margaret was planning something that would make all my fears seem small in comparison. The idea for a joint birthday celebration came from Margaret herself, presented with the kind of false enthusiasm that should have been my first warning sign. Emma's birthday fell on December 8th, while the twins' shared birthday was December 20th. Close enough that combining celebrations seemed practical, especially with the holidays approaching. "It would be so much more efficient," Margaret suggested one evening as we cleared the dinner dishes, "and with all 3 children entering their teenage years, it should be something truly special." She paused dramatically, as if the thought had just occurred to her. "We could make it a real milestone celebration." Michael thought it was brilliant, and even I had to admit the practical benefits were appealing. 1 venue, 1 cake, 1 set of decorations, and both sides of the extended family could attend without juggling multiple weekend commitments during the busy holiday season. What I didn't realize was that Margaret had been orchestrating this moment for weeks, carefully laying the groundwork for what she had planned. I threw myself into the planning with my usual attention to detail, determined to make this celebration perfect for Emma, despite my growing unease about Margaret's motives. I booked the community center near our neighborhood for the Saturday between the actual birthdays, December 14th. The venue was perfect, large enough for extended family and friends, with a full kitchen and space for activities. I designed custom invitations featuring photos of all 3 children, sent digital copies to family and friends, and created a shared planning document where everyone could contribute ideas. The cake order alone took 3 phone calls to perfect. A 3-tiered creation with Emma's favorite lemon flavor on the bottom, chocolate for Nathan in the middle, and strawberry for Olivia on top, decorated with each child's interests and hobbies. David and Sarah agreed to handle beverages and photography, while Michael volunteered to manage music and games. The division of labor felt fair and collaborative, though I noticed Margaret inserting herself into conversations about special surprises, with a secretiveness that made my skin crawl. Emma was absolutely glowing with excitement about her approaching 12th birthday. She'd been counting down days on her calendar, circling December 8th in glittery pink pen and adding little stars around December 14th for the party. "This is going to be the best birthday ever, Mom," she told me one morning while getting ready for school. "A real party with all our family and my friends. I feel like I'm finally growing up." Her joy was infectious, and despite my concerns about Margaret, I found myself caught up in Emma's anticipation. We spent evenings planning her room makeover, looking at paint samples and browsing online for the perfect string lights to create the sophisticated teenage atmosphere she craved. 2 weeks before the party, Margaret asked me to drive her to the shopping center for last-minute decorations. I thought nothing of it until we split up in the craft store and she disappeared for over an hour. When she finally met me at the checkout counter, she was empty-handed, but seemed oddly satisfied, checking her watch and mentioning she had one more quick errand to run. That afternoon, I overheard another of Margaret's hushed phone conversations with David. "Perfect," she was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "The latest model, just like we discussed. Import cases and everything. They'll never see it coming." When she spotted me folding laundry nearby, she quickly ended the call with a breezy, "Just finalizing some party details with David." The pieces of Margaret's plan were falling into place, though I remained oblivious to the scope of her intentions. All I knew was that mysterious packages had begun arriving at our house, small boxes that Margaret immediately spirited away to her room with explanations about personal items or things David asked me to hold. During our family dinner 1 week before the party, Emma shared her birthday wish list with the kind of hopeful vulnerability that made my chest tight with love and concern. "I've been thinking about what I really want," she said, looking around the table with bright eyes. "That photography workshop would be amazing. And maybe some professional art supplies. Oh, and I know this is a big ask, but my phone is literally dying. It shuts off in the middle of the day sometimes." She paused, glancing at Margaret hopefully. "I don't need anything expensive. Even a basic phone would be incredible. Just something that works for school projects and staying in touch with friends." Margaret's response was barely perceptible. A slight nod and murmured, "Photography supplies, how interesting," before she immediately pivoted to discussing the twins. "What are Olivia and Nathan hoping for this year? I imagine their interests have become more sophisticated now that they're turning 13. The contrast in Margaret's engagement was stark and painful to witness. Her voice carried genuine curiosity and warmth when discussing the twins, while Emma's heartfelt wishes were dismissed with polite indifference. Emma's face fell slightly, but she quickly masked her disappointment with the kind of practiced resilience that broke my heart. Michael had been working extra weekend tutoring sessions, specifically to afford a decent gift for Emma. "I want to get her that camera she's been wanting," he told me one night after Emma had gone to bed. "She's been so patient about everything, and she deserves something special, even if it means eating ramen for a few weeks." I loved him fiercely in that moment, this man who would sacrifice his own comfort to see our daughter's face light up with joy. We had managed to save enough for a mid-range digital camera and the photography workshop she'd mentioned, though it would definitely strain our budget. Meanwhile, my friend Rachel continued to provide perspective during our regular coffee meetings. "The joint party feels like a setup," she warned after I described Margaret's unusual level of involvement. "Be prepared for something public and humiliating. People like Margaret often choose moments when their victims can't escape or respond appropriately." Her words proved prophetic in ways I couldn't have imagined. The weekend before the party, Emma and I spent a morning baking sugar cookies shaped like cameras and paintbrushes, small touches she wanted to add to the celebration. As we mixed dough and cut shapes, Emma confided her hopes for the future. "Do you think Grandma will like the photo album I made for her?" she asked, flour dusting her cheek as she concentrated on rolling the dough evenly. I spent weeks collecting all those old family pictures and wrote captions for each one. I wanted to show her how much our family means to me. The hopefulness in her voice was devastating, because I suspected Margaret would barely acknowledge the thoughtful gift. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Anyone would be honored to receive something so personal and carefully made." As the party date approached, Margaret's behavior became increasingly erratic. She received daily packages that she guarded like state secrets, took mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly whenever anyone approached, and developed an almost giddy excitement that seemed disproportionate to a children's birthday party. The night before the celebration, I found myself lying awake, unable to shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Margaret's secretiveness, her obvious favoritism toward the twins, and her barely concealed disdain for Emma had been building toward something. I just never imagined she would use a child's birthday party as the stage for such cruelty. Emma fell asleep that night, with her new dress laid out carefully on her chair, a beautiful teal fabric that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, and her hair accessories arranged on her dresser. Her excitement was palpable, and as I tucked the blanket around her sleeping form, I made a silent wish that tomorrow would bring her the joy she deserved. If only I had trusted my instincts and prepared her for the heartbreak that was coming. But sometimes the cruelest blows are the ones we never see approaching, and Margaret had spent months perfecting her aim. December 14th dawned crisp and clear, with fresh snow dusting the Denver skyline like powdered sugar. Emma was awake before her alarm, too excited to sleep. She had carefully planned every detail of her appearance the night before, the teal dress that made her eyes sparkle, silver ballet flats, and the delicate heart pendant Michael and I had given her on her actual birthday the week prior. "How do I look, Mom?" she asked, spinning in front of our full-length mirror with the kind of pure joy that made my chest ache with love. "Absolutely radiant," I answered truthfully. "Every bit the sophisticated 12-year-old you've become." We arrived at the community center 2 hours early to set up. The plain rental space transformed under our careful attention into a winter wonderland of silver, blue, and white decorations. Twinkling fairy lights draped from the ceiling, creating a magical canopy over the dance floor. 3 poster boards displayed photos chronicling each child's journey from babyhood to present day, Emma's artistic evolution, Nathan's athletic achievements, and Olivia's musical milestones. A long gift table held wrapped presents from our immediate family, waiting for the ceremonial opening later. Michael's camera for Emma sat among them, wrapped in silver paper with a handmade card expressing our pride in her creativity and growth. David and Sarah arrived precisely at 2 o'clock with the twins, who looked like they'd stepped from a magazine, Olivia in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, Nathan in perfectly coordinated casual wear that screamed expensive brand names. Margaret immediately rushed to them, straightening Nathan's already perfect collar and gushing over Olivia's shoes. Emma approached with her characteristic shy smile, clearly hoping for similar attention. "Hi, Grandma. Do you like my dress? Mom and I picked it out together." Margaret glanced at Emma briefly, offered a distracted nod, then immediately turned back to the twins. "Olivia, darling, you look absolutely stunning, and Nathan, so handsome. Come, let me show you where you'll be sitting for the cake ceremony." I watched Emma's face fall before she quickly recovered, plastering on a brave smile as she went to greet her cousins. The twins, to their credit, seemed genuinely happy to see her, though their attention spans were limited by their phones and the immediate distraction of friends arriving. Soon the community center buzzed with the energy of teenage celebration. We'd invited Emma's classmates, the twins, friends, neighbors, and extended family, about 50 people total. The activities Michael had organized were popular: a photo booth with silly props, a karaoke station, and several game areas where teens gathered in shifting groups. Emma flitted between friend clusters, her initial nervousness giving way to genuine enjoyment as she showed off the decorations we'd created together and introduced her school friends to her cousins. For a few hours, I allowed myself to relax and enjoy watching her happiness. The food spread was designed with teenage tastes in mind: sliders, a nacho bar, fruit kebabs, and an assortment of finger foods that disappeared rapidly. Margaret had insisted on bringing her famous deviled eggs, though I knew none of the kids would touch them. Sure enough, they remained untouched while everything else vanished. At 4:30, it was time for the cake ceremony. The 3-tiered masterpiece was wheeled out, 12 candles flickering on each level, casting a warm glow over the gathered crowd. Phones emerged from pockets to capture the moment as friends and family pressed closer. Emma, Nathan, and Olivia stood behind the cake, Emma positioned in the center since her actual birthday was closest to the party date. "Make a wish," I encouraged as the singing ended. The 3 preteens exchanged glances, took deep breaths, and blew out their candles in unison. Applause erupted as Michael began cutting and serving slices. After cake came the moment many had been anticipating: opening presents. We'd arranged 3 chairs at the front of the room, and the birthday celebrants took their seats as guests gathered around with phones ready to capture their reactions. The gift opening proceeded smoothly at first. Friends and extended family had brought thoughtful presents: art supplies and books for Emma, sports equipment for Nathan, music-related items for Olivia. Emma thanked each giver with genuine gratitude, her pile of unwrapped treasures growing steadily beside her chair. When most of the presents had been opened, Margaret suddenly stood and cleared her throat loudly. "I have something very special for my grandchildren," she announced, her voice carrying across the now quiet room. Every conversation stopped. Every phone turned toward her. She disappeared into the back storage room and returned carrying 2 identically wrapped boxes with elaborate gold ribbons, boxes that were unmistakably the size and shape of phone packaging. My stomach plummeted as the pieces of her plan became horrifyingly clear. "For my precious grandchildren on this milestone birthday," Margaret proclaimed, presenting the packages to Nathan and Olivia with theatrical flourish. The twins tore into the wrapping eagerly, and gasps of excitement escaped them as they revealed brand-new iPhone 15 Pro Max phones, the latest model that had been released just months earlier. "Grandma, oh my God!" Nathan exclaimed, jumping up to embrace Margaret. "This is incredible! Thank you so much! I can't believe it!" Olivia squealed, also hugging her grandmother. "This is the best gift ever!" Margaret beamed with obvious pride, basking in their gratitude. "Only the finest for my darling grandchildren," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The room had grown noticeably quieter as people processed the extravagance of the gifts. These weren't basic phones, but top-tier models, easily costing over $1,000 each. All eyes gradually turned to Emma, who sat very still in her chair, hands folded in her lap, confusion and hope warring on her face as she waited for her grandmother to produce a third package. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Parents shifted nervously. Teenagers looked between Emma and Margaret uncertainly. "Grandma?" Emma finally said, her voice small but carrying in the hushed room. "Did you get something for me too?" Margaret turned to Emma, and the expression on her face made my blood freeze. It wasn't apologetic or embarrassed. It was cold, dismissive, almost annoyed at being questioned. "That's all I brought," she said flatly. "I only purchased gifts for my actual grandchildren." The silence that followed was absolute. 50 people collectively held their breath, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Emma's face crumpled in confusion and dawning hurt. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice beginning to tremble. Margaret shrugged with casual cruelty. "You're not really family, dear. Not by blood, anyway. These 2 are my real grandchildren." The words hit like physical blows. Not really family. Real grandchildren. The adoption. Something we had never hidden from Emma. Something we had always framed as a beautiful story of how we became a family through love, was being wielded as a weapon to exclude and humiliate her. Emma's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. She stood up so abruptly that her chair tipped backward, the crash echoing in the stunned silence. Then she ran from the room, shoulders shaking with sobs. I immediately followed, pausing only long enough to shoot Margaret a look that promised this conversation was far from over. Behind me, I could hear Michael's voice rising in anger, but all my focus was on reaching my daughter. I found Emma in the women's bathroom, collapsed in the corner stall, knees drawn to her chest. Her carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears, her joy completely extinguished. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, kneeling beside her and pulling her into my arms. She melted against me, her body heaving with sobs. "Why does she hate me, Mom?" she choked out between ragged breaths. "What did I do wrong? Is it because I'm adopted? Is it because I'm not really yours?" "Nothing, baby," I assured her fiercely, stroking her hair. "You did absolutely nothing wrong. And you are really ours, in every way that matters. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does. Grandma is wrong, completely and utterly wrong." We stayed in that bathroom until Emma's sobs quieted to sniffles, until I could help her clean her face and smooth her hair. When she was ready, we returned to collect her gifts and say goodbye to her friends, though the party was effectively over, guests streaming toward the exits to escape the tension. Margaret had revealed her true nature in the cruelest possible way, and there would be no going back to pretending everything was fine. As we drove home in heavy silence, Emma staring out the window with empty eyes. I knew that our family would never be the same. The real battle was just beginning. The drive home from the community center felt like traveling through a nightmare. Emma sat in the back seat, staring out the window with hollow eyes, while Michael gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Margaret had ridden to the party with us, but David had offered to drive her home later, clearly wanting to remove her from the immediate fallout of her cruelty. As we pulled into our driveway, I reached over and placed my hand on Michael's arm. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said quietly. The weight of those words settled between us like a stone. He nodded grimly. "I know. Everything has changed now." Emma went straight to her room and locked the door behind her. Despite my gentle knocking and offers of her favorite comfort foods, she remained sequestered, only responding through texts that she wanted to be alone. I respected her need for space, while keeping my ears tuned for any sounds of distress. Michael and I retreated to our bedroom for what I knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of our marriage. I paced the hardwood floor while he sat on the edge of our bed, head in his hands. "I can't believe she would say something so heartless," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed fury. "Actually, I can believe it. The signs have been there all along, but this was beyond anything I imagined possible." "She's getting older," Michael said weakly, though his heart wasn't in the excuse. "Maybe she didn't understand how it would sound." I stopped pacing and stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious right now? I only purchased gifts for my actual grandchildren. You're not really family." "How exactly was she not understanding how that would sound, Michael?" He sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're right. I know you're right. It was inexcusable." He looked up at me with pain etched across his features. "She's my mother, Zoe. I've never seen her act like this before." "Really?" I challenged him, sitting down beside him on the bed. "What about last Christmas when she gave the twins those expensive gaming systems and got Emma a $5 journal from the clearance rack? Or when she drove 2 hours to watch Nathan's basketball tournament but claimed she was too sick to attend Emma's art exhibition that was 15 minutes away? Or all the time she's forgotten Emma's dietary preferences but remembers exactly how the twins like their sandwiches cut?" I pulled out the small journal I'd been keeping and opened it to a random page. November 18th. Margaret spent 40 minutes on the phone with Olivia, discussing her school dance dress, but when Emma tried to show her the poem she'd written about family, Margaret said she had a headache and couldn't concentrate. Michael listened as I read entry after entry, his face growing paler with each example. "This has been happening for over a year, Michael. The only difference is that today she said the quiet part out loud." He was quiet for a long moment, processing the documented pattern of behavior I'd laid before him. "I guess I didn't want to see it," he finally admitted. It was easier to make excuses than to admit my mother could be so deliberately cruel to a child, to our child. Around 11 o'clock, I heard soft crying from Emma's room and knocked gently on her door. "Sweetheart, can I come in?" After a moment, the lock clicked, and I entered to find her curled up on her bed, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. A toy she'd long claimed was too babyish, but could never quite bring herself to pack away. I sat beside her and stroked her dark curls, waiting for her to speak first. "Why doesn't Grandma love me, Mom?" she finally whispered, the question piercing straight through my heart. "Is it really because I'm adopted? Because I'm not her real granddaughter?" "Listen to me carefully," I said, tilting her chin up to meet my eyes. "You are our daughter in every single way that matters. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does. Choice does. We chose you, Emma. We wanted you more than anything in the world." I brushed tears from her cheeks with my thumbs. Grandma's inability to see how precious you are says everything about her limitations and nothing about your worth. Emma nodded, Though I could tell my words, while appreciated, couldn't fully heal the wound Margaret had inflicted. We talked until she fell asleep, exhausted from the emotional devastation of the day. I tucked the blanket around her and kissed her forehead before quietly leaving the room. The next morning brought an almost surreal normalcy. Margaret came downstairs for breakfast, complained that the coffee was too weak, and asked about our plans for the day, as if the previous day's party had been a complete success. She showed no recognition of the devastation she'd caused, no awareness that anything unusual had happened. Michael and I exchanged glances over our coffee mugs, silently communicating that a confrontation was unavoidable. "Mom," Michael began, setting down his mug with deliberate care. "We need to talk about what you said to Emma yesterday." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, is she still upset about that?" Children are so dramatic these days. In my generation, we learned resilience instead of wallowing in hurt feelings. "You told my daughter she wasn't part of the family," Michael said, his voice low but intense. "You deliberately excluded her while giving expensive gifts to her cousins. How exactly should she have developed resilience about that?" Margaret sighed dramatically, as if we were being unreasonably difficult. "I'm sorry if feelings were hurt. That wasn't my intention. But facts are facts, Michael. The girl is adopted. Nathan and Olivia are my blood relatives, my actual grandchildren." "Her name is Emma," I interjected, unable to contain myself any longer. "Not the girl Emma, and she has been our daughter since she was 6 days old." Margaret pursed her lips but said nothing further. The conversation ended in a tense stalemate when Emma came downstairs, her eyes puffy from crying. Margaret barely acknowledged her presence, busying herself with the newspaper, while Emma silently ate a small bowl of cereal. Later that day, while doing laundry, I found a receipt in the pocket of Margaret's jacket. It was from an electronics store showing the purchase of 2 iPhone 15 Pro Max devices totaling over $2,400. The date on the receipt was 3 weeks earlier, confirming that this exclusion had been premeditated, not a spontaneous decision. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. Margaret had planned to humiliate Emma all along, had calculated this public cruelty weeks in advance. Even worse was the realization that Margaret clearly had substantial savings, despite claiming financial hardship as her reason for moving in with us. $2,400 for phones wasn't pocket change for someone supposedly struggling to afford basic necessities. How many other lies had she told us? What else had she been hiding? Over the next few days, Emma withdrew from family activities completely. She took meals in her room, claiming homework obligations, and avoided common areas when Margaret was present. She stopped sharing her artwork with us and fell silent during the rare dinners when she joined us at the table. The vibrant, creative child who had filled our home with laughter and stories retreated into herself like a wounded animal seeking shelter. On Wednesday, I received a call from Emma's school counselor, Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I wanted to check in about Emma. She's been unusually quiet in classes this week, and her art teacher mentioned she hasn't been participating in discussions, which is very unlike her. Her English teacher also said she missed turning in an assignment, which has never happened before. Did something occur that we should be aware of?" The call confirmed what I already knew. Margaret's cruelty was affecting Emma's academic performance, her social interactions, and her entire sense of self-worth. My simmering anger began to boil over. That evening, I confronted Margaret directly about the receipt. "You spent over $2,000 on phones for the twins, but couldn't get anything for Emma. And all this time, you've been claiming you can barely afford your medications." Margaret's face hardened into stone. "My money is my business, Zoe. I can spend it however I choose, and I choose to spend it on my actual grandchildren." While living rent-free in our home, I pointed out, my voice steady despite my rage, eating food we buy, using utilities we pay for. "Michael invited me to live here," she countered coldly. "If you have a problem with that arrangement, Perhaps you should discuss it with your husband." That night, Michael and I had the conversation that would change everything. "I think Mom has been manipulating us," he admitted, staring at the ceiling as we lay in bed. "Using her supposed financial problems to gain sympathy while hoarding money for things she actually wants to spend on, like spoiling the twins. It's worse than manipulation, Michael. It's emotional abuse. She's systematically undermining Emma's sense of belonging and self-worth. If we don't act now, the damage could be permanent." Michael was quiet for a long moment before asking the question I'd been dreading. "What do you think we should do?" "Your mother needs to leave our home," I said firmly, the words I'd been rehearsing finally spoken aloud. "I know she's your mother, and I know this is difficult, but our primary responsibility is to Emma." To my relief, Michael didn't argue. "You're right," he said simply. "I've been trying to balance loyalty to my mother with protecting Emma, but there's really no choice here. Emma has to come first." As I lay awake that night, planning the conversation that would change our family forever, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The decision was made. Whatever the consequences, whatever bridges would burn, Emma's well-being was worth more than keeping peace with a woman who had shown herself capable of such calculated cruelty toward a child. Tomorrow, I would ask Margaret to leave our home, and for the first time in months, that thought brought me something close to peace. I spent the sleepless night preparing for the most difficult conversation of my life. At 3 a.m, I crept downstairs to the kitchen and opened my laptop, researching articles about emotional abuse, family boundaries, and the psychological impact of toxic relationships on children's development. Every piece of literature confirmed what my heart already knew. Allowing Margaret to continue undermining Emma's sense of belonging would cause irreparable damage to my daughter's emotional well-being. When Michael found me at the kitchen table at 6:30, surrounded by printed articles and handwritten notes, he didn't seem surprised. "You've been up all night," he observed, concern creasing his features. "Michael, we need to have the conversation with your mother today," I said without preamble. "This situation isn't sustainable. The impact on Emma is too severe to wait any longer." He poured himself coffee and sat across from me, nodding slowly. "I know. I've been thinking about it too. What she did at the party, and then her complete lack of remorse afterward, it's unforgivable. I had outlined a careful approach." Michael would go to work as usual to avoid alerting Margaret to our plans. I would call in sick to cancel my client appointments, explaining that a family emergency required my immediate attention. After Emma left for school, I would have the necessary conversation with Margaret. Before implementing our plan, I called my mother for emotional support. She had always been my voice of reason during difficult times, and I needed her wisdom now more than ever. "You're doing the right thing, mija," Mom assured me, using the Spanish endearment that always made me feel stronger. No child should feel unwelcome in their own home, especially by a grandparent who should be a source of unconditional love. Be firm, but calm. This is about Emma's well-being, not about punishing Margaret, though Lord knows that woman has earned it. After ending the call, I waited until Margaret left for her weekly grocery shopping trip to the King Soopers down the street. The temporary reprieve from her presence allowed me to gather my thoughts and steel myself for what was coming. I reflected on my own childhood experiences with my paternal grandmother, a bitter woman who had made me feel constantly judged and found wanting. I had promised myself I would never allow Emma to experience that kind of emotional manipulation, yet here we were. At 11 o'clock, Margaret returned with her usual collection of shopping bags. I helped her unload groceries, making casual conversation about the unseasonably warm December weather and holiday plans. Once everything was stored away, I suggested we sit down with coffee. "There's something important we need to discuss," I said, keeping my tone neutral and calm. Margaret followed me to the kitchen table, settling into her usual chair with mild curiosity. I placed her coffee in front of her, prepared exactly as she preferred, with 1 sugar and a generous splash of cream, and took the seat directly across from her. "Margaret," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I want to talk about what happened at the birthday party and the ongoing pattern of how you've been treating Emma." She rolled her eyes dismissively. "Are we still dwelling on that? I thought we had moved past this unfortunate misunderstanding." "No, we haven't moved past it," I said firmly. "What you said deeply hurt Emma. Telling her she's not part of the family because she's adopted was cruel and completely untrue." "I simply stated a biological fact," Margaret replied, sipping her coffee with infuriating calm. "The girl is not genetically related to me. Nathan and Olivia are. It's really quite straightforward. Emma is our daughter in every way that matters," I countered, feeling my composure waver slightly. "Family is built on love and commitment, not just DNA. And even if you personally held that outdated view, to announce it publicly at her birthday party while lavishing expensive gifts on her cousins was deliberately hurtful." Margaret's expression hardened. "Children today are pampered excessively. In my generation, we learned to accept reality without all this emotional coddling." "This isn't about coddling," I said, my voice growing stronger. "This is about basic respect and human decency, which you've consistently failed to show Emma. Perhaps if you had raised her with more discipline, she wouldn't be so sensitive," Margaret sniffed. "Though I suppose, given her unknown background, certain behavioral tendencies are to be expected." I felt my blood pressure spike at her words. "What exactly do you mean by unknown background?" Margaret leaned forward, apparently pleased to have struck a nerve. "Let's be honest, Zoe. You come from a completely different social class than our family. Your father worked in construction, your mother was a school secretary. And then, instead of continuing to try for a biological child, you adopted a baby of uncertain origins." The mask had finally dropped completely. I stared at her, momentarily speechless at the naked classism and prejudice in her words. "Those other children come from good stock," Margaret continued, warming to her favorite topic now that she had a captive audience. "Proper breeding on both sides. David married appropriately within his social circle, and their children reflect that wise choice." It was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the full scope of Margaret's bigoted worldview. Her favoritism wasn't just about biological relationships. It was about her perception of social class, economic status, and what she considered appropriate family connections. "Emma is a kind, intelligent, creative person," I said, my voice now steely with controlled anger. "The fact that you can't see her value because you're fixated on some antiquated notion of breeding says everything about your character and nothing about hers." Margaret's mouth tightened into a thin line. "I can see Michael has failed to teach you proper respect for your elders. But then, considering your background, perhaps that's to be expected." "My background?" I repeated. "You mean growing up with parents who taught me that character matters more than bank accounts? Who raised me to judge people by their actions, not their pedigree?" "Precisely," Margaret sniffed. "Perfectly adequate, I'm sure, but hardly the sort of values James was raised with. And now you're instilling those same common attitudes in the girl." I took a deep breath, recognizing that Margaret was trying to provoke an emotional outburst that would allow her to dismiss my concerns as hysteria. "Margaret," I said finally, "I'm going to ask you directly. Will you apologize to Emma for what you said at the party and commit to treating her with the same respect and affection you show Nathan and Olivia?" Her response was immediate and unapologetic. "I have nothing to apologize for. The truth may be uncomfortable, but that doesn't make it less accurate. The girl is not my blood relative, and I'm under no obligation to pretend otherwise." I nodded slowly, having received exactly the answer I'd expected but still hoped against. "In that case, I need you to pack your belongings and leave our home." "You have 24 hours." Margaret's eyes widened in genuine shock. "Excuse me? You have 24 hours to pack your things and find alternative accommodations," I repeated, my voice calm but absolute. "This is not negotiable. This is Michael's house, too," she sputtered. "You can't make this decision unilaterally." "Michael and I have already discussed this," I informed her. "He agrees that your presence is harmful to Emma and that you need to leave." "This is absurd." Margaret's voice rose to a near shriek. "Where am I supposed to go on such short notice?" "You have options," I said matter-of-factly. "David has a guest room. Or you can use some of that money you spent on iPhones to get a hotel until you find an apartment. The choice is yours, but you will not be living in this house after tomorrow morning." Margaret's face flushed red with indignation. "You can't throw me out. I'm an elderly woman with nowhere to go. You're a 67-year-old woman in excellent health who has been taking advantage of our hospitality while secretly hoarding money and emotionally abusing our daughter," I corrected. "And yes, I absolutely can ask you to leave under those circumstances." Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Michael will hear about this," she threatened, reaching for her phone. "Yes, he will," I agreed calmly. "In fact, he's expecting your call." Margaret immediately dialed Michael's school, her voice carrying through the kitchen as she gave her version of events. "Your wife has completely lost her mind, threatening to throw me out on the street after everything I've done for this family." I continued sipping my coffee, mentally preparing for the next phase of this confrontation.
20 minutes later, Michael walked through our front door, having left school early to handle the crisis. Margaret rushed to him immediately, relief flooding her features. "Thank goodness you're here," she said dramatically. "Zoe has been making outrageous demands and threats. She actually thinks she can evict me from your home with just 24 hours notice." Michael looked from his mother to me, his expression serious but resolved. "Let's all sit down and discuss this properly," he suggested, leading us to the living room. Once we were seated, Michael turned to his mother with the calm authority I'd fallen in love with years ago. "Mom, is it true that you told Emma she's not really family because she's adopted?" "I merely acknowledged biological reality," Margaret defended. "The girl isn't my genetic grandchild. I can't be expected to feel the same connection to her as I do to Nathan and Olivia." "And did you also tell Zoe that Emma has an unknown background and comes from inferior breeding?" Michael continued, his voice hardening with each word. Margaret hesitated, perhaps realizing how her prejudices sounded when repeated back to her. "I might have expressed some concerns about maintaining appropriate family standards," she hedged. Michael shook his head slowly. "The appropriate standard for our family would be having a grandmother who loves all her grandchildren equally and doesn't rank their worth based on biology or perceived social class." Margaret's eyes filled with strategic tears. "You're taking everything out of context," she whimpered. "I'm an old woman who occasionally speaks too directly. Surely you wouldn't throw your own mother out over a simple misunderstanding?" "This isn't a misunderstanding," Michael said firmly. "This is a pattern of behavior that has been damaging Emma for over a year. As her father, my job is to protect her, even if that means making difficult decisions about family relationships." The conversation that would reshape our family forever had begun, and there would be no going back. Seeing that her manipulation tactics weren't working on Michael, Margaret immediately shifted strategies and called David, presenting herself as the victim of an unreasonable daughter-in-law's vendetta. Within 90 minutes, David and Sarah had arrived at our house, their faces tight with concern and confusion. Our living room became the setting for a tense family summit that would determine Margaret's future and, ultimately, the direction of our family relationships. "Let me understand this correctly," David said after hearing both versions of events, his lawyer training evident in his methodical approach. "You're asking Mom to leave because she bought phones for my kids but not for Emma?" "No," I clarified firmly. "We're asking Margaret to leave because she publicly humiliated Emma by announcing she's not really family because she's adopted, and has continued making hurtful comments that undermine Emma's sense of belonging and self-worth." David looked uncomfortable, glancing between his mother and us. "Mom, did you really say that?" "I may have expressed myself poorly," Margaret admitted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that had appeared from nowhere. "But I never meant to hurt anyone's feelings. You know how much I care about all my grandchildren." Actually, that's exactly the problem, Michael interjected, his patience clearly exhausted. You don't care about all your grandchildren. You consistently favor Nathan and Olivia while treating Emma as an afterthought at best, and an interloper at worst. Sarah, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Margaret, I have to say, I've noticed it too. Her quiet admission seemed to surprise everyone, especially David. The way you talk about the children is very different. You light up when discussing Nathan and Olivia's achievements, but you barely acknowledge Emma's accomplishments. I've seen it at family gatherings. David looked genuinely shocked at his wife's intervention. Sarah, you never mentioned. I didn't think it was my place, she said quietly. But watching Emma try so hard to connect with you, Margaret, while you remained distant, it's been painful to witness. Margaret's face flushed with indignation. So now everyone is conspiring against me? After everything I've sacrificed for this family? What exactly have you sacrificed? Michael asked pointedly. You've lived rent-free in our home for 18 months, contributed minimally to household expenses while claiming financial hardship, all while apparently having enough savings to spend over $2,000 on gifts for David's children. The conversation continued in circles for nearly 2 hours, with Margaret alternating between defensive justifications, tearful appeals to family loyalty, and outright denial of the documented pattern of favoritism. David initially tried to defend his mother, but gradually began to understand the gravity of the situation as more specific incidents were revealed. I had no idea about most of this, he admitted, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that reminded me painfully of Michael. The things you've said when we weren't around, Mom, it's not acceptable. Finally, David offered what he probably thought was a diplomatic solution. Mom can stay with us temporarily while she looks for her own place, he suggested. Our guest room is available, and it would give everyone some space to cool down and work things out. Margaret latched onto this lifeline immediately. Yes, that would be perfect. I can stay with David and Sarah until this misunderstanding blows over and Zoe comes to her senses. This isn't about coming to my senses, I stated firmly. This is a permanent boundary. Margaret is welcome to visit our home in the future if she demonstrates genuine change and offers a sincere apology to Emma, but she will not be living with us again. Fine, I'll apologize if that's what it takes, Margaret said dismissively, as if checking an item off a to-do list. No, Michael said, his voice carrying surprising authority. A forced apology under duress is meaningless. This isn't about saying the right words to get what you want. This is about genuinely recognizing that your behavior has been harmful and making real changes to how you treat Emma. By late afternoon, practical arrangements were being finalized. David would help Margaret pack her belongings the following morning. She would move into their guest room while searching for independent housing. Michael made it clear that our financial support would be minimal going forward, given Margaret's apparent ability to make significant purchases on her own. As the family meeting wound down, Emma returned home from school, stopping short in the doorway when she saw the assembled relatives. Confusion crossed her features, followed by a weary recognition that this gathering was somehow connected to the birthday party disaster. What's happening? She asked, cautiously, looking between Michael and me for guidance. I gestured for her to join us, and Michael explained gently that Margaret would be moving out to stay with Uncle David and Aunt Sarah for a while. Because of the party? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because of what she said about me? Because of Grandma's choices and behavior, Michael corrected carefully. Adults are responsible for their own actions and the consequences that follow. Emma processed this information silently, a complex mix of emotions playing across her young face. Is she angry with me? Grandma is upset about having to move, I explained, choosing my words carefully. But none of this is your fault, sweetheart. We want our home to be a place where everyone feels loved and respected, and unfortunately, Grandma hasn't been treating you with the respect you deserve. That evening, while Margaret made a theatrical show of beginning to pack, complete with dramatic sighs and pointed comments about being cast out in her old age, I decided to take Emma out for some one-on-one time away from the tension. Let's go to that art supply store you love, I suggested, and maybe get some ice cream afterward. At the art store, I encouraged Emma to choose whatever supplies spoke to her creative spirit: professional-grade colored pencils, high-quality paper, even a small easel she'd been admiring for months. As we sat at our favorite ice cream shop afterward, I used the opportunity to reinforce some crucial truths. "You know that being adopted doesn't make you any less our daughter, right?" I said, watching her carefully arrange her ice cream toppings with the same methodical precision she brought to her artwork. "I know," she said softly. "It just hurts that Grandma can't see it that way." "Some people have very narrow ideas about what makes a family," I explained. "But those ideas are outdated and wrong. You are our daughter in every way that matters. We chose you, we wanted you desperately, and nothing anyone says can change that." Emma was quiet for a moment, stirring her ice cream thoughtfully. "Do you think Grandma will ever change her mind about me?" I considered my answer carefully, wanting to be honest without completely crushing her hope. "I don't know, sweetheart. People can change if they want to, but they have to recognize there's a problem first. What I do know is that we're not going to let anyone make you feel less valued or loved, even if that person is family." As we drove home, Emma seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden she'd been carrying had been lifted. The healing process would take time, but removing the source of daily hurt from our lives was already having a positive effect. The next morning brought a flurry of packing activity. David arrived at 9 o'clock with his SUV to transport Margaret's accumulated possessions. Michael had taken another day off work to oversee the process and provide moral support for Emma, who remained subdued, but appeared more relaxed than she had in weeks. Breakfast was an awkward affair, with Margaret picking at her food while making pointed comments about abandonment and ingratitude. Michael remained firm but respectful, refusing to engage with her guilt-tripping tactics. Before leaving for school, Emma made one final attempt at grace, a gesture that filled me with pride despite everything that had happened. "Goodbye, Grandma," she said softly, approaching Margaret in the hallway. "I hope you'll be happy at Uncle David's house." Margaret's response was cool and distant. "Goodbye, Emma," she said without warmth, offering no embrace, no term of endearment, no sign of remorse for the pain she had caused. Even in this final moment, Margaret couldn't bring herself to show basic kindness to the child she had wounded so deeply. Emma's drooped slightly, but she lifted her chin with quiet dignity and walked out the door to catch her school bus. Michael had a private conversation with his mother in her room before the final departure. I didn't overhear their exchange, but when he emerged 20 minutes later, his eyes were red-rimmed, though his posture remained resolute. "She still doesn't understand," he told me quietly. "She sees herself as the victim in all of this, but I made it clear that our priority has to be Emma, and that any future relationship depends on her ability to genuinely respect our daughter." At 11 o'clock, David closed the trunk of his SUV on the last of Margaret's belongings. There were stiff handshakes, awkward embraces, and promises to stay in touch that everyone knew would be difficult to fulfill, at least initially. As David's car disappeared around the corner, carrying Margaret away from our home and our daily lives, I felt a profound shift in the atmosphere around us. The house seemed to exhale, releasing tension that had been building for months. "I never thought it would come to this," Michael admitted, standing beside me on the porch. "Having to choose between my mother and my daughter." I squeezed his hand. "You didn't choose between them. Your mother forced that choice through her own actions. You simply protected Emma, which is exactly what a good father should do." That evening, we had our first dinner as just our family of 3 in over a year and a half. The empty chair where Margaret usually sat went unmentioned, but conversation flowed more freely. Laughter returned to our table, and Emma volunteered stories about her day without prompting, small but significant changes that spoke to the healing that was already beginning. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at me with eyes that seemed older, but somehow brighter than they had in months. "Thank you, Mom," she said simply, "for standing up for me." "Always, sweetheart, I promised. That's what families do for each other." And for the first time in a very long time, our home felt like the sanctuary of love and acceptance it was always meant to be. 6 months after Margaret's departure, I stood in Emma's newly painted room, admiring the deep blue walls she had dreamed about for so long. String lights twinkled like stars across the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the space that had truly become her teenage sanctuary. Art supplies were organized in clear containers on her desk, and her latest paintings hung in carefully arranged clusters on the walls, a gallery of her growing talent and confidence. "Mom, look at this one," Emma called from her easel, where she was working on a watercolor landscape. The painting showed a sunrise breaking through storm clouds, with vibrant colors bleeding into each other in ways that spoke of hope emerging from darkness. "I think it might be good enough for the spring art show." "It's absolutely beautiful, sweetheart," I said, meaning every word. "Your technique has improved so much since you started those weekend classes." The photography workshop Michael had given her for Christmas had been just the beginning. Emma's artistic confidence had blossomed in ways that filled our home with creative energy. Her bedroom walls showcased not just paintings, but also striking black and white photographs she'd taken around Denver. Architectural details, candid portraits of friends, nature scenes that captured moments of quiet beauty. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. Those first few weeks after Margaret left had been a delicate time of rebuilding and healing. Emma had struggled with complicated feelings of guilt, wondering if she had somehow caused the family rift. Michael and I had spent many evenings reassuring her that adult relationships and their consequences were never a child's responsibility. I had arranged for Emma to see a counselor who specialized in helping children process complex family dynamics. Dr. Martinez, a warm woman with gentle eyes and infinite patience, had given Emma tools for understanding and articulating her emotions. The weekly sessions had been invaluable in helping our daughter rebuild her sense of self-worth and security. "Trauma doesn't define us," Dr. Martinez had explained during one of our family sessions, "but how we respond to it, how we heal from it, and what we learn about ourselves in the process, that shapes who we become." Emma had taken those words to heart, channeling her experiences into her art and writing. Her poetry had developed a depth and emotional intelligence that amazed her teachers. When she'd been selected to read one of her pieces at the school's spring literary evening, Michael and I had sat in the auditorium with tears streaming down our faces, overwhelmed by pride in her resilience and growth. The changes in our family dynamics had been profound and largely positive. Without the constant tension of Margaret's presence, our home had become the peaceful sanctuary it was meant to be. Dinnertime conversations flowed naturally, filled with Emma's enthusiastic accounts of her day, Michael's stories from his classroom, and my updates about clients whose lives were being transformed through art therapy. Our financial situation had improved significantly as well. Without supporting Margaret, we had been able to invest in Emma's interests, the art classes she'd always wanted, photography equipment that fed her growing passion, and even a weekend trip to Santa Fe, where she could see professional artists, studios, and galleries. These weren't extravagant expenditures, but they represented our ability to prioritize our daughter's dreams without feeling guilty about not meeting someone else's unspoken demands. Michael had struggled the most with the aftermath of our decision. His relationship with David had become strained, though not irreparably damaged. David's initial anger about Margaret having to leave our home had gradually given way to understanding as his own household experienced the challenges of living with his mother full-time. I had no idea how demanding she could be. David had confided during a difficult phone call with Michael in February. The constant criticism, the way she pits our kids against each other when she thinks they're not meeting her standards. Sarah's at her breaking point. Margaret had remained with David and Sarah for only 3 months before finding her own apartment. Even that arrangement had been fraught with tension, as Margaret's true personality had emerged without the buffer of our household to moderate her behavior. Nathan and Olivia, initially thrilled by their grandmother's undivided attention, had grown weary of her constant demands for gratitude and her dismissive comments about other family members. The Easter family gathering had been telling. David and Sarah had hosted, but the atmosphere had been notably subdued. Margaret had held court at one end of the table, regaling anyone who would listen with stories about how she'd been unfairly treated by Michael and me. Meanwhile, the children had gravitated toward the other end of the table, where natural conversation and laughter could flourish without her critical oversight. Emma had been nervous about attending that gathering, our first extended family event, since the birthday party incident. But she had handled herself with remarkable grace and maturity. When Margaret had made a pointed comment about some family members being too sensitive, Emma had simply continued her conversation with Olivia about an art project, refusing to take the bait. Later that evening, Olivia had approached Emma privately. "I'm sorry about what Grandma said at your birthday party," she had whispered, her usual confidence replaced by genuine remorse. "It was really mean, and I felt bad about the phone thing. Nathan did too." Emma had hugged her cousin warmly. "It's not your fault, Livy. You didn't know what she was planning." That moment had shown me how much Emma had grown, not just in height and artistic ability, but in emotional intelligence and her capacity for forgiveness. She had learned to separate Margaret's actions from her cousins, worth maintaining her relationships with Nathan and Olivia while protecting herself from further harm. My own relationship with Margaret remained non-existent, and I felt no regret about that boundary. I had tried for 18 months to include her, to show her kindness, to help her feel welcome in our home. Her response had been to weaponize Emma's adoption story and attempt to undermine our daughter's sense of belonging. Some bridges, once burned by cruelty, should remain ash. Michael had maintained minimal contact with his mother, dutiful phone calls on holidays, brief texts acknowledging birthdays. Margaret had made no genuine effort to apologize to Emma or change her behavior. Instead, she continued to position herself as the victim of unreasonable demands and ungrateful children. "She's chosen to live in her version of reality," Michael had observed sadly. "And in that version, she's never done anything wrong." We had focused our energy on building the family life we wanted, rather than trying to repair relationships that others refused to acknowledge were broken. Emma's confidence had returned gradually but steadily. Her room reflected her growing sense of self, art supplies organized with precision, books stacked on her nightstand showing her evolving interests, photos with friends displayed proudly on her bulletin board. One particularly memorable evening in late spring, Emma had emerged from her room carrying a wrapped package. "I made something for you and Dad," she had said, her cheeks pink with excitement and nervousness. Inside the wrapping was a mixed media piece, a painted canvas featuring a tree with strong roots and flourishing branches, with small photographs of our family moments carefully integrated into the design. At the base of the tree, she had written in her careful calligraphy, "Family, where love makes all the difference." Michael and I had both cried that night, overwhelmed by the beauty of her creation and the message it conveyed. Emma understood, perhaps better than many adults, what truly makes a family. The piece now hung in our living room, prominently displayed where everyone who visits can see it. It has become a conversation starter with friends, and a daily reminder of what we've learned about love, loyalty, and the courage required to protect those we cherish most. As summer approached, we began planning Emma's 13th birthday celebration, a small gathering of her closest friends, an art-themed party where guests could create their own masterpieces to take home. No extended family drama, no complicated politics, just pure celebration of our remarkable daughter. "I want it to be completely different from last year," Emma had said while we browsed party supply catalogs. "Just about fun and friends and being happy." "That's exactly what it will be," I had promised her. Looking back on the painful journey that had brought us to this point, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the difficult decisions we had made. Standing up to Margaret, setting firm boundaries, choosing Emma's emotional well-being over keeping peace. These choices had cost us some family relationships, but had saved the most important one. Emma bounded into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner, her paint-stained apron marking another successful afternoon of artistic creation. "Mom, Mrs. Chen said my portfolio is good enough to apply for the summer intensive program at the Art Institute," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's competitive, but she thinks I have a real chance." "That's incredible, Emma. Tell me about it." As my daughter described her artistic ambitions and the opportunities opening before her, I marveled at the resilience of children. 6 months ago, Emma had been a wounded little girl, questioning her worth and her place in our family. Today, she was a confident young teenager who knew exactly how much she was loved and valued. Michael appeared in the doorway, his face tired but peaceful after a long day of teaching, but brightened immediately upon seeing Emma's excitement. "What's all the celebration about?" he asked, wrapping both Emma and me in his arms for one of his signature family hugs. As Emma explained her news to her father, I reflected on the family we had built. Not perfect, certainly scarred by recent battles, but rooted in genuine love and mutual respect. We had weathered Margaret's attempts to divide us, and we had emerged stronger and more united than ever. That evening, as the three of us sat around our dinner table, sharing stories and laughter without the shadow of criticism or judgment, I knew we had made the right choice. Family isn't about blood or breeding or meeting someone else's arbitrary standards. Family is about showing up for each other, protecting each other, and creating a space where everyone feels valued and loved. Emma was our daughter, chosen and cherished, talented and strong, and in our home, that truth would never again be questioned or diminished by anyone. The battles were over. The healing had begun, and our family's best chapters were still being written.